Good evening. My name is Camille Peters, and I'm a librarian at the main branch in Oakland. And I'm excited to introduce tonight's program, a discussion of ballot measures, pros and cons with the League of Women Voters. For over 100 years, the League of Women Voters has worked to expand voter access, fight voter suppression, advocate for limits of money in politics, and oppose partisan and racial gerrymandering. This discussion will be a nonpartisan review of local and statewide ballot measures for the November election. So I'm going to introduce our two panelists. Deborah Scheffler is a retired lawyer and past president of the Oakland League. And Liz Hartka is a retired healthcare administrator and is thrilled that she joined the League this June. Okay, take it away.
Thank you, Camille, for that wonderful introduction, and good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. I will be sharing a slide deck, so let me set that up. And hopefully you can all see a single slide that says 2022 ballot measures. Does that look good, Deborah? Okay, great. Okay, so let's get started here. Okay, once again, my name is Liz Hartka. Thank you for inviting the League to make this presentation on the November ballot measures. The League of Women Voters is a grassroots, nonpartisan organization of women and men. Nonpartisan means that we never support or oppose political parties or candidates. The League has two branches. In voter services and education, we work to present complete information and the arguments on all sides of an issue. So that's what my colleague Deborah and I will be doing with you this evening, is trying to give you the information that you need in a nonpartisan way, enough that will allow you to make an informed decision on the November ballot. We do have an advocacy branch, but they're separate, and we're representing the education branch here. If you have a question about any of the information that we present this evening, please type your question in the chat box in Zoom. We'll leave some time at the end of this evening's presentation to get to your questions, or as many of them as we can. Also, I will be going through my slides fairly quickly because there's a lot of material to cover. If you'd like me to come back, or like us to come back to any specific slide, we'd be happy to do that at the end. So let's start off with a slide that offers some suggestions for evaluating measures. You can ask yourself, what does the measure do and why? What does it cost? How will it be paid for? Is it well written, or will it cause more problems than it solves? Follow the money. Who is really behind it? And which side do you agree with, support or oppose? Ultimately, that's how you'll make your decision when you vote. However, it's okay to leave blanks on your ballot because voting is not a test. You should vote for what's clear and important to you. This evening, we'll be talking about all 7 propositions on the state ballot for California. I'll be covering that, and I will also address the single county measure for Alameda County. And then Deborah will walk you through the 10 local measures for the city of Oakland. Let's start with the propositions. There are basically 2 ways to get a proposition onto the California ballot. The legislature can place propositions on the ballot, and that's what happened with Proposition 1, which we'll get to in a second. Or any California voter can put an initiative or a referendum on the ballot if they get enough voter signatures to do so. So Props 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30 are initiatives. 31 is a referendum. We'll get to 31 at the end. That one's a little different. Well, let's start with Proposition 1, the Reproductive Freedom Proposition. In June 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court ended the federal constitutional right to abortion. There is concern that the right to contraception may be under similar threat. Now, abortion is legal under California state law today. The proposition does not change the law. If it passes, Prop 1 would add the right to an abortion or contraception to the California Constitution. It would make it harder for future state government to change the law to limit reproductive rights or for future California courts to overturn existing case law. There are no estimated budget effects for Prop 1. This next slide, this is the follow the money slide. I'm going to spend a little extra time on this one because I'll probably go through these quickly for the other propositions, but basically they're set up. You've got folks on the left, or individuals or organizations on the left, who are funding the for campaign, and then those on the against who are opposed on the right. On these slides, there's a couple things to look out for. There's dollar signs that symbolize how much that individual or organization has contributed to the campaign. The more dollar signs, the more money they've spent. Also, names that are in boldface mean that those people or organizations are signatories to the proposition. And then finally, I'll point out that if a large California newspaper has published an editorial either for or against a proposition, we've tried to include that information in these slides. So for reproductive freedom, we've got some organizations like the California Medical Association and Planned Parenthood in the for column, as well as editorials by the LA Times and Mercury News. In the against column, we have some faith-based organizations, the Republican Party of America, and so on. Reasons to support Prop 1. If you agree that reproductive freedom should be included as a right in the California Constitution, you would support. If you agree that reproductive medical decisions belong with individuals and their healthcare providers, you would also support this proposition. On the other hand, if you say that women already have the right to choose under current California law, Proposition 1 is not needed to protect women's health or their reproductive rights, you might oppose it. Or if you don't support reproductive freedom as a right, you would also oppose it. A yes vote on Prop 1 means yes, the California Constitution should explicitly include rights to reproductive freedoms. A no vote means don't change the Constitution. So let's move on to the next two propositions. Both deal with gambling. Proposition 26 allows in-person roulette, dice, and sports betting. The background to this is currently, if you want to gamble legally in the state of California, you have four options. You can buy a lottery ticket, you can go to a card room and play a game like poker, you can go to a racetrack and bet on a horse race, or you can go to a tribal casino and gamble there. What Proposition 26 proposes to do is give you more avenues for in-person gambling, and in-person is the operative term here. You could do sports betting at racetracks and tribal casinos if this passes. And by sports betting, I mean betting on like professional sports like baseball and football and so on and so forth. And you can also play a roulette or a dice game at a tribal casino, which you cannot currently do with our laws today. The fiscal effects, we're expecting increased state revenues to the tune of tens of millions of dollars annually. And this is after you subtract out the increased costs to enforce and regulate the new law. Here's the dollar slide again. In the for column, most of the funding is coming from large California Indian tribes that run casinos, and they've been joined by many other tribes. In the against column, 6 non-tribal card rooms who are concerned that their business might be harmed if Proposition 26 goes through. Reasons to support. Well, additional revenues could be raised through Prop 26 to help Indian tribes provide vital services to their members. Also, sports betting will be in person only to provide safeguards against underage gambling. Reasons to oppose. Well, if you think that the tribal casinos have a big enough monopoly on gambling in California now, you would tend to oppose this proposition. Also, if you're concerned about that gambling is addictive, legalizing more types of gambling, it would probably lead to bad effects for public health and public safety. A yes vote means allow more in-person gambling options. A no vote means limit the gambling to the current options we have available today. Prop 27 allows online sports betting. The operative word here is online. So the background is that most sports betting is not allowed in California. It's not legal in California. The only thing that's legal is horse racing, which I mentioned before. The effect Prop 27 would legalize online betting for sports events, such as professional baseball or football, as well as online betting for some non-athletic events like award shows or current events. This online betting would be offered by Indian tribes and the gambling companies that contract with them. No betting would be allowed on youth sports or elections. The fiscal effects are that, well, 10% of the gambling profits would go to the state, which is taken right off the top. So state revenues will increase possibly by hundreds of millions of dollars annually. This is a big market, even with the increased state costs of enforcing and regulating the new law. The increased state revenues would first pay for state regulatory costs. Then from the remainder, 85% would be allocated to support programs that alleviate homelessness, that treat mental health and gambling addictions. The remainder, or the other 15%, would go to tribes who are not involved in online sports betting. Here's the money slide. Again, we see large amounts of money being spent on these for and against campaigns. In the for column, it's mostly online gaming corporations, and there are three big ones that have contributed the lion's share. In the against column, the California Indian tribes that are basically lobbying for Proposition 26. Reasons to support: you think we should have more money available to combat homelessness or to treat mental health and addictions, then you would support this proposition. And it may be more advantageous for the smaller tribes that can't support a big casino to get funding through Prop 27. Reasons to oppose: this benefits large gaming companies and blocks smaller operations. There are very steep fees to participating in the California market under this proposition, and it also makes gambling much more accessible. Anyone with a smartphone can do it. A yes vote means allow online sports betting. A no vote means do not allow it. Prop 28 concerns more funding for arts and music in schools. Thanks to Prop 98, the state is required to spend a minimum amount on K through 14 education, that's kindergarten through two-year community college, every year. This minimum guarantee, which is about 40% of the total budget, is calculated annually. There's currently no guaranteed source of funding for arts and music education in K through 12 public schools. Prop 28 would require funding for arts and music education to be at least 1% of the funding that was received in the prior year under Prop 98. This funding would be in addition to the funding that's already guaranteed by Prop 98. Prop 28 would allocate proportionately more funding to schools serving many low-income students. The fiscal effects increase state expenses to the tune of about $1 billion each year, which would come from the state general fund. On the money slide, we see in the for column, we have some educators and then some bigwigs in the entertainment industry. In the against column, not much sentiment against this proposition. If you believe that arts and music education can improve a student's personal and academic life, you would tend to support this proposition. Also, currently, only 1 in 5 schools have a dedicated teacher for arts programs. Reasons to oppose: well, if this proposition passes, it would limit the state funds available for other spending. In other words, that 1% is earmarked specifically for arts and music education. And this limits the flexibility that the legislature has on addressing the highest needs in the state. A yes vote means guaranteed funding for arts and music education in K through 12, and a no vote means don't change the current funding. Proposition 29, more regulations for kidney dialysis clinics. If this sounds familiar, it's because similar propositions have been on the ballot. There was Prop 8 in 2018 and Prop 23 in 2020, neither of which passed. So in the interest of time, I'm going to try and sort of summarize this quickly and move on. What Prop 29 proposes, they are proposing to have higher level staff in dialysis clinics, and that the clinics would be required to report dialysis related infections more frequently. They would also have to disclose to their patients who owns the clinic. They would need permission to close or reduce services, and they would have to treat all comers regardless of payment type. The fiscal effects are as follows. The clinics would probably have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars more annually for staff salaries. And that's because most of these clinics are staffed by registered nurses or RNs now. The staff that are required under Prop 29 are much higher level and much more expensive. So if a clinic closes and patients have to go to a more expensive facility, such as an emergency room to get dialysis, or if the clinics negotiate higher reimbursement rates so they can stay in business, then state and local governments might have to pay tens of millions of dollars more annually, because if the costs increase, they need to be passed on to someone. The people who are lobbying most strongly for Prop 29, who are paying for the advertising, are the SEIU, Health Workers Union, who've been trying to organize or unionize staff in dialysis clinics for several years now. In the against column, we have the two largest providers of dialysis services in the state of California, DaVita and Fresenius Medical. We also have a couple other medical associations listed there. If you believe that we do need these higher level staff who would be available during all the treatment hours in a dialysis clinic, then you would support this proposition. Also, if you think it's a bad thing to discriminate against dialysis patients based on who's footing the bill, you would support this. If you are concerned about dialysis clinics closing in the state due to increased costs, and you are concerned that these additional requirements could deplete hospital and emergency rooms because staff there would need to deal with dialysis patients in addition to everything else they deal with, you would tend to oppose this. So a yes vote is more regulations on kidney dialysis clinics. A no vote is keep the current regulations. The next proposition 30 is the Millionaires tax. California, and it has to do with electric cars. California has a number of zero emission mandates that 35% of new cars are zero emission vehicles or ZEVs by 2026, and 100% of new vehicles are ZEVs by 2035. The state requires ride-sharing companies like Lyft and Uber to have 90% of their drivers driving ZEVs by 2030. Both federal and state governments have committed to spending billions of dollars in tax credits and other incentives to speed up the adoption of ZEVs. California alone has budgeted $6 to $10 billion over the next 6 years. What Prop 30 would do is increase the income tax rates on individuals with high incomes. The money that's raised through this increase would be spent as follows. 45% would go to promote the purchase of ZEVs, 35% to increasing the availability of charging stations throughout the state, and 20% would go to fund wildfire suppression and prevention. The fiscal effects, well, increasing the income tax rate by 1.75% on individual incomes above the $2 million mark would generate, it's estimated, $3.5 to $5 billion a year. Of that, 2.8 to 4 billion would go to ZEV funding, and 700 million to 1 billion would be for wildfire response. In the money slide, the lion's share of the for campaign is coming from Lyft, the ride-sharing company. And the against side, we have some millionaires, and they've been joined by Governor Newsom and the California Teachers Association. Reasons to support. Well, greenhouse gas emissions from cars and other transportation are the largest contributors to climate change. This proposition should make ZEVs more affordable. So for those reasons, you might tend to support it. Reasons to oppose. State and federal governments are already spending billions of dollars to speed up the adoption of ZEVs. It's possible that some high earners might leave the state because they would have the highest income tax rate in the US if this proposition goes through. Also, the proposition locks in money raised by the tax increase, and it goes into a separate bucket that can't be touched by the legislature for anything else, like school funding, for example. A yes vote means you approve of a new tax on incomes over 2 million to increase electric vehicle adoption and fight wildfires. A no vote means no change to the current tax rate. The last proposition that I'll tell you about is Prop 31, bans flavored tobacco products. In 2020, a law was passed to ban stores and vending machines from selling flavored tobacco products. Flavors like fruit, menthol, and chocolate can mask or enhance the taste of tobacco. This law was challenged and is currently on hold. The proposition is a referendum on this law. The law will only go into effect if the voters approve this proposition. The fiscal effect will be to reduce state tobacco tax revenues, and that reduction could range from tens of millions of dollars to possibly $100 million. Spending money in favor of Prop 31 are some healthcare organizations and the Governor Newsom, who's endorsed it. And in the against column, we have large tobacco companies and the California Republican Party. Reasons to support: if you believe that flavored tobacco products can lure middle and high school children into a lifelong addiction to nicotine, you would tend to support this proposition. Also, if you believe that flavored tobacco products can make it harder to quit smoking. Reasons to oppose: well, it's already illegal to sell tobacco to individuals under the age of 21. So some people think that a total prohibition on tobacco is not necessary to keep it away from youth. Also, in addition, a ban may lead to more smuggling and crime. Criminalizing the sale of menthol cigarettes would disproportionately impact minority communities. So a yes vote on Prop 31 would allow the law to take effect, the law to ban the sale of flavored tobacco products. A no vote means the law will not take effect. The sale of flavored tobacco products will continue. And now we're at the Alameda County measures, and I can see, I think I've run out of time, so let me get through this quickly. Measure D is on the ballot. Measure D was originally passed in the year 2000, and it was called the Save Agriculture and Open Space Lands. It was passed in order to preserve and enhance agriculture in unincorporated areas of Alameda County. It's on the ballot now because some changes have been proposed. Basically, what's being proposed is in 2000, the measure said you can only have a structure so big on your landmass, on your agricultural landmass, so the ratio of the size of the building to the land area had to fall within a certain range. What Measure D is proposing is that we change the ratio, increase it in certain places like agricultural buildings and equestrian arenas to allow expansion. So just real quickly, reasons to support this would be basically if you agree that it's a good thing for places like these equestrian facilities to be able to increase their performance areas and generate more income. Likewise, wineries and olive presses and other agricultural concerns would be allowed to expand storage areas, processing, retail facilities, and that would encourage business. Reasons to oppose: well, some opponents say that Measure D would enable a handful of big wineries to triple in size. And they also believe that Measure D would weaken Alameda County's environmental protections. So in support, we have the Alameda County Board of Supervisors. They're the ones who put this measure on the ballot. Also, the Greenbelt Alliance, which is an environmental organization. So far, there's been no official opposition registered against Measure D. And with that, I will quickly turn it over to Deborah, who is going to walk us through the Oakland city measures.
Okay, I am going to share my screen now. All right. Okay, Oakland ballot measures. Just one second. Okay. Let me make one adjustment. All right. How do measures get on the Oakland ballot? The City Council can place a measure on the ballot, and 8 of the 10 measures that I'm going to talk about got on the ballot that way. OUSD, the school district, can also place a measure on the ballot, and we have one of those. And finally, citizens can place an initiative on the ballot through the signature process that you're all familiar with, and we have one of those. Now, the first measure to talk about is the college. I just have to move the College and Career Fund. So in 2014, Measure N was passed by voters, and it's an annual parcel tax to allow high schools to develop pathways to careers such as business, education, and healthcare. It also paid for integrating high school academics with career-based learning and real-world work experience. Measure N will expire in June 2025. Now, Measure N has provided a stable source of approximately $11.5 million in annual dedicated funding to promote this program. The impact has been positive and significant, with double-digit improvement in graduation rates for African American and Latinx students. Overall, graduation rates increased from 61% to 73% from when the program started to just before COVID. Measure 8 will extend the parcel tax of $120 for 14 years through 2037. There are exemptions for senior and low-income households, and the measure requires an independent auditor to issue an annual report and audit. Why isn't this changing? Just a second here. Just a second. Somehow it's not working. Okay, reasons to support. Well, first one is that Measure N.
Deborah, we're not seeing your slides now.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You just need to share your screen again.
Okay. Yes. Let's see. I'm sorry. Let's see. Okay, well, let me get that.
Looks good.
Does that look good?
Yeah, we can see it.
All right. So the reason to support is that N has been effective, and given Prop 13, there are very few ways to ensure consistent funding for this program. Reasons to oppose. Future funding should come from the OUSD budget now that this program has proven its value. This is what your vote means. The next one is the Affordable Housing Authority. In California, if a city wants to build an affordable housing project, the city's voters must approve that project. This is state law. Measure Q would authorize 13,000 affordable housing units in Oakland. There are no fiscal effects because there's no specific projects approved or funded. However, Such projects could be initiated under another measure that we'll be discussing in a few minutes, Measure U, the infrastructure bond. Reasons to support. Measure Q would support Oakland's overall housing plans, and this authorization allows larger projects to move forward without unnecessary delays. Reasons to oppose. There is no formal opposition published as yet. Gender-neutral language. The Oakland City Charter uses gender-specific words to refer to city workers and officials. For example, the City Charter uses the word fireman. The City Charter also uses male and female pronouns like he and she. Measure R would change the City Charter by replacing gender-specific words with gender-neutral words. For example, the Charter would use the word firefighters instead of firemen. The City Charter would also use gender-neutral programs like they instead of he and she. Measure R is not expected to have an effect on city income or spending. So this is the same problem again. It's not, I'm sorry, this,
I think it worked. It moved forward.
did it?
I think it might be that you clicked off of the page and then tried to move forward.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, it looks like it moved forward a slide.
Okay, well, let me just, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You can see the reasons to support and the reasons to oppose. The next one is non-citizen voting. This is a little more complicated. So currently, to vote in Oakland school board elections, Oakland residents must be U.S. citizens and at least 18 years old. Non-citizens cannot vote. Non-citizens include legal permanent residents, people with work visas, and the undocumented. There are over 13,000 non-citizens who send their children to Oakland schools. San Francisco has been allowing non-citizens to vote in school board elections since 2016, but this law is currently being reviewed by the courts. Measure S amends the charter to allow the City Council to pass a law to permit non-citizen residents to vote in Oakland school board elections if they are parents, guardians, or legal caregivers of eligible children. The City Council would set the qualifications and criteria of eligibility for non-citizen voters. If the law passes, Oakland would incur an estimated $21,000 to $28,000 in additional costs to administer this program. However, Oakland and Alameda County would also incur unspecified costs for keeping track of additional voter data. Reasons to support. Well, it would enable all parents and guardians of children in Oakland to influence school board policies. Parents and guardians of children have the most incentive to elect good school board leaders. They should be allowed to do so. It would promote educational policy that considers the needs of marginalized communities and encourages participation in the civic process. Reasons to oppose. As immigration laws are specific and strictly interpreted, non-citizens could risk significant unintended consequences. Implementation would be difficult and could be costly given the need to set up a separate voter registration system and to conduct effective public outreach to inform residents. And finally, Oakland should wait until the law is settled and avoid unnecessary legal challenges and expenses. Measure T. All businesses in Oakland pay a business tax. Currently, Oakland businesses are classified into many categories, such as grocers, hotels and motels, manufacturing, and so on. Businesses within a certain category all pay the same yearly flat tax, regardless of their size. The tax code for rental property and cannabis taxes was updated in 2019, so Measure T will not apply to those businesses. Measure T would change the business tax to a progressive tax. That means that businesses pay higher rates when they earn more money, much like marginal rates increase in our income taxes. Oakland has nearly 60,000 small businesses and just over 50 large companies. About 6,000 small businesses would actually pay less tax under Measure T. But companies with administrative headquarters that earn more than $20 million could pay many times what they pay now. The business tax in 2020 to 21 generated approximately $104 million for Oakland's general fund. The proposed measure could raise 21 to 22 million more. Reasons to support. Well, other cities like San Francisco, Richmond, and San Jose have progressive tax rates, so should Oakland. This measure reflects extensive input and compromise from the City Council, labor, and business groups, and allows Oakland to raise much-needed revenue. Reasons to oppose. Well, tax hikes may cause businesses to leave Oakland or to avoid locating here. Businesses may instead choose cities with lower taxes like Berkeley and Pleasanton. Tax rate increases should be introduced slowly and not all at once to give time to study the impact and adjust tax increases only as needed. Measure U, the infrastructure bond. In 2016, Measure KK approved bonds for $600 million for street paving, to repair city facilities, and to build affordable housing. That money has mostly been spent and more is needed, especially for affordable housing. Measure U would approve $850 million in total. If approved, Measure U would provide $350 million for the rehab or new construction of affordable housing, $290 million for street paving, pedestrian safety, and other transportation projects, and $210 million for city facilities like library, fire, and police, as well as parks. Required public authorization for such projects would be available under Measure Q, which we discussed just a few minutes ago. To repay the bonds, including interest, Oakland will increase property taxes at about $67 per 100,000 of assessed value. Assessed value is not the same as market value. For example, if your house is assessed at $500,000, you would pay an additional $335 per year in taxes. However, Oakland recently adopted a policy to limit taxation for overall bond repayments to 0.22%. So the maximum a homeowner would pay for Oakland City bonds is $220 per 100,000 of assessed property value. To implement this policy, the city intends to issue the proposed bonds as older bonds are retired or the tax base grows. Reasons to support. Measure U provides funds to continue the work begun under Measure KK, especially for more affordable housing. Oakland needs to continue to repair and upgrade its fire and police facilities, libraries, parks, rec centers, and streets. Reason to oppose. Well, standards for oversight are not as stringent and specific as they could be. Taxes are already high. Oakland should pay down existing bonds before issuing new ones. Just cause evictions. So Oakland voters have passed many renter protections in the past 20 years, and you can see on the slide some of them. Current renter protections generally apply to buildings built before 1995, identifies different tenant actions such as failure to pay rent or destroying the property, which justify an eviction, but it also gives owners the right to evict even if there is no tenant at fault in order to occupy the units themselves or to do significant repairs that require the tenant to move out. What would the new measure do? Well, it would add more buildings to the to what is covered, and to what is covered, and it would cover more tenants. Motorhomes and tiny homes would be covered, and it would limit the owner right of move-in or repair during the school year. It is anticipated to have no significant fiscal effects. Reasons to support. Well, Measure V will help reduce the, will help reduce the risk of displacement for more tenants. Reducing this risk for students and school employees is especially important. In order not to discourage new construction, Measure V exempts units, including accessory dwelling units or ADUs, that have been built in the last 10 years. Reasons to oppose. It may still discourage the construction of new housing. Without more new housing, rents for existing housing will continue to increase. Giving special tenant protections to school employees and families with children may discourage landlords from renting to them. This measure may also discourage landowners from allowing motorhomes on their land. The Fair Elections Act. Individuals and organizations who donate to political candidates can acquire significant influence because running for political office costs money. In Oakland, a few donors provide most of the money for campaigns. Public campaign funding programs can reduce big donor influence. Oakland has a small campaign funding program that reimburses some expenses for city council candidates. Measure W would create a new campaign funding program. Through this program, registered voters and other eligible residents could receive 4 $25 vouchers, a total of $100. They could donate this money to candidates of their choice running for mayor, city auditor, city attorney, council member, or school board director. Candidates who participate in the program would need to limit their total campaign spending and provide campaign spending reports. Measure W requires that the 3 highest contributors to a campaign be disclosed on all materials supporting or opposing Oakland candidates or measures. Also, Measure W would lower the limits for donations to candidates from $900 to $600 for individuals, businesses, and organizations, and from $1,800 to $1,200 for political committees. Measure W would also reduce political influence through restrictions on lobbying. Former city council members and other city officials would be prohibited from lobbying for 2 years, it's currently 1 year, after they leave government service. Oakland would pay $700,000 in startup costs, $1.6 million every year for administrative costs to cover 4 staff members and non-staff costs, and $4 million every other year, every 2 years, for vouchers that are provided to the candidate campaigns. Reasons to support. Measure W will make elections more fair for candidates who don't have connections to large donors. A similar program in Seattle has worked well to increase candidate diversity and has led to greater participation in elections from people across a range of races, ethnicities, ages, and income levels. Reasons to oppose. Candidates who have connections to large donors may choose not to participate in the program, and they may still have a big advantage in elections. Measure W will cost a lot, and it is not an effective use of city funds, which should be spent on other needs. Measure X. Now, this one has a number of subparts, so bear with me. The Oakland City Council has 8 council members who are elected directly by the people of Oakland. The council sets goals and priorities for Oakland, approves the city budget, adopts laws, and appoints members to various boards and commissions. Currently, there are no term limits for city council members. They can stay in office for as long as they keep winning elections. Measure X proposes to limit council members to 3 consecutive terms, so that 3 4-year terms. However, they can run again after sitting out 1 term. Council members can put measures on election ballots. Currently, measures may be placed on the ballot after only 1 public hearing. Measure X will require 2 hearings before a measure is placed on the ballot. Council members vote on city laws. Currently, when voting by council members results in a tie, the mayor casts the deciding vote. If a council member wants to prevent a tie, they can avoid casting their own vote. This prevents the mayor from being able to cast the deciding vote. Measure X will count council members' abstentions and absences as no votes. Currently, the Public Ethics Commission sets the salaries of council members. With Measure X, the PEC will set council members' salaries every 2 years using the Consumer Price Index. Currently, council members set the salaries of city auditor and city attorney. With Measure X, the PEC will set the city attorneys and city auditors' salaries based on salaries of similar positions. Currently, the city auditor and city attorneys are allowed to support candidates and ballot measures with money, endorsements, and help with campaign activity. Measure X will not allow that. And finally, currently, the city auditor's office is not required to employ a specific number of staff members. Measure X will give the city auditor, more responsibility and require that the city auditor have government experience. The city auditor's office will need to employ at least 14 full-time staff members. Reasons to support. This addresses some of the problems with Oakland current government operations. Restricting political advocacy may make the offices of city auditor and city attorney more effective. Increasing the salaries of city auditor and city attorney may help Oakland attract and retain more qualified candidates. Reasons to oppose. This is not a comprehensive reform, but a piecemeal approach to fix some of the issues. Bundling different reforms together in one measure does not give voters the option to vote for some reforms but reject others. Term limits are not absolute or strict because council members can seek re-election after sitting out one term of office. Measure Y. This is the zoo parcel tax. This is an initiative put on the ballot through the signature process. The Oakland Zoo's annual budget is about $24 million. Entry fees, food, souvenirs, and rides provide the majority of its operating revenues, which have been badly impacted by the COVID pandemic. The zoo receives about 8% of its budget from public funding, from Oakland, Alameda County, and East Bay regional parks. Oakland Zoo has almost 1 million visitors a year. About 15% are from Oakland. Measure Y would be funded by a 20-year parcel tax starting in 2023. It would raise about $12 million in additional funding for the zoo's operation, staffing, maintenance, and capital improvements annually. The measure requires Oakland and other public funding to stay at the same current level. Residential property owners would pay $68 annually, and owners of multi-unit residential parcels would pay $68 annually for each unit. Certain exemptions will be available for low-income households and seniors. Non-residential property owners would be taxed based on the size of their property. All assessments would be subject to annual cost of living adjustments. Measure Y requires an independent annual audit and an annual report from the city auditor. Reasons to support. Well, the zoo needs funding to keep its budget stable and to expand operations. A partial tax funding would allow the zoo to expand educational programs and offer free passes. These efforts would benefit Oakland schools, nonprofit organizations, low-income residents, and seniors. Reasons to oppose. This measure does not have enough financial accountability because it does not specify how much tax revenue will be spent on each of the zoo's different needs. It does not require that specific benefits be provided to Oakland residents. This is not fair because only Oakland property owners would be paying the tax, and 85% of zoo visitors live outside of Oakland. And that concludes the section on local measures. And I'm going to stop sharing and pass the baton back to Liz.
Thank you, Deborah, for that great presentation. I will see. Share my screen, and hopefully this won't mess up too much. First of all, thank you all who joined us this evening. Thanks for being a voter. A couple minutes ago, I put these links in the chat box, so you should have them available. I don't think I linked them exactly, but you'll have the address for the website. We have a terrific website for the League of Women Voters. We have lots of resources available to you. I just want to share with you a couple things real quick. All the pros and cons information that you heard tonight should be accessible on the website. In particular, we have this really nifty page for the measures that Deborah just presented, where you can download a one-page summary for each of the Oakland City measures, or you can watch a brief video that will highlight some of the issues that are covered by that measure. And I believe that the next slide just kind of gives you a real quick overview of the history of the league. We're founded in 1920. That's the year that women got the right to vote as a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We, as Camille mentioned at the very beginning, we were working to strengthen democracy at all levels of government, local, state, and national. And that's our mission is education and advocacy. If you care about making democracy work, please consider joining the league. You can go to the league website for the League of Women Voters in Oakland, and you can go in there. There's a special membership section where you can sign up. And I signed up in June, and I'm very glad I did it. So with that, I will close. And I'd like to turn it over to Anna, my colleague Anna, so she can do the Q&A section of our meeting.
Super. Thanks so much, Liz and Deborah. We have one question. This is for Deborah on Measure W. How would the voucher system work?
So that's a great question. Each registered voter and other people who request a voucher will receive 4 vouchers in the mail. Each one is worth $25. And the idea is to encourage people to get involved with the election that way. So you would want to decide, well, okay, who am I going to give this money to? You'd actually have $100, and you could give it to 4 different candidates. And the idea is to get, it's about 1% of Oakland residents who actually contribute to campaigns. And people who contribute to campaigns are the people who have influence. So the idea behind this is to get more people excited about the election, more people saying, oh, I've got $25, I've got $100. Let me think about these candidates. Let me decide who I want to give my money to. So that's kind of how it will work. Now, the system has to be set up. You noticed I said there's a $700,000 setup cost, and they would sort of set up the technology for how you would actually donate and cash in these vouchers.
Super. That's great, Deborah. Anyone else, you have any questions, please pop them into the chat. We'd love to hear your questions. Liz, while we're waiting for another question, could you just recap Prop 26 and Prop 27? Because I seem to have the most questions around those in all the sessions that I've done. So quick recap would be great.
Sure, I'll do what I can. So they're both gambling propositions. Prop 26 is, one way to differentiate. Prop 26 involves in-person gambling, and Prop 27 is online gambling. Prop 26 would be sports betting at racetracks and tribal casinos in person. And the other thing is it allows the tribal casinos to expand their offerings to roulette and dice games. Prop 27, it's basically, I don't want to get into too much detail because I'll get into trouble really fast, but Prop 27 allows online sports betting And you can also bet on awards events like the Oscars or the Grammys. You can also vote on current events. You can't, both of these propositions try to put in safeguards against voting on youth sports. So those are generally excluded. And you can't vote on elections ever. So that's consistent across both propositions. The amount of money that would come in is different. Obviously, there's a belief that the market for Prop 27 is going to be huge and it's going to generate lots of revenue. So there's that issue. Is there anything else I can talk about that might help?
No, I think you've covered it pretty well.
Okay.
Again, I just want to pause for any other questions that we might have. Deborah, I'll just pose one more to you because this often is asked. Could you just do a quick recap of bonds versus parcel taxes? Because I know a number of our measures, there's one of bonds and 2 parcel taxes. Just a quick recap on that.
Yeah, so a parcel tax is a set amount of money per piece of property. So for instance, the one for the zoo would be $68. And if you had, a $500,000 house or a $2 million house, you pay $68. The bond one, though, is set on what's called an ad valorem basis, which means it's based on the assessed value of your property. So in this one, what the city has done is it's capped the amount you would have to pay for the previous set of bonds and the follow-on set of bonds, Measure U, at $220. That's capped at $220 per 100,000 of assessed value. So it's not a set amount, it's an amount based on the value, the assessed value of your home, which is not the same as the market value. It's usually quite a bit lower than the market value, although not good things have been happening to market values lately, although I guess it's good if you're trying to buy a house. So anything else?
So there was also a question, and the person asked, I don't recall the letters, but there are 2 on the ballot related to infrastructure. How are they alike and different? And I think they might mean measures U and Q.
Okay, so let's see, Measure Q. So Measure U is the infrastructure bond that I was just discussing, and it would be $850,000, and that doesn't all get issued at one time. It's issued over time as projects that have been authorized by the voters under Measure Q sort of get developed. And then they're funded through this bond money. So the bond money is really kind of a pool of money that's available to issue bonds. People buy bonds, and they buy bonds because they get interest payments on the bonds. And since they're municipal bonds, they're actually tax favored. So it's a great way of supporting things like paving our streets, improving, and affordable housing is a big part of it, improving our infrastructure.
Right, and exactly, and Measure Q is related to the authorization part again, like you were saying that,
Yeah, so Measure Q is, it doesn't really cause any money to flow. What it is we are just saying that, okay, City Council, we authorize you to make some infrastructure expenditures under measures, the infrastructure measures, I guess it's KK and U, so that then when they're ready to fund a project, they don't have to go back to the voters, because state law requires that the voters approve these projects.
Super. Thanks very much. Thank you. Camille, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much for a really informative program. And there are links in the chat that you can follow to get more information. And have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye.
everybody.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.